festival of Sukkot. Now, even though if you're in Chutz La'aretz, if you're outside of Israel, you have 8 days. Still, the festival is 7 days long, and our Ushpizin are 7. Now, when Ushpizin is Aramaic for guests. Now, the easiest way to discuss the Ushpizin, I felt, our holy 7 guests, is to follow the pattern of the story of the 7 beggars. And this is with a big caveat, because we have here an hour, and when I teach the 7 beggars, we're finishing a cycle of it now, and it has taken, I don't know, 8 months, maybe more. So I don't know, I can't remember how many sessions we've already had, like at least 20-something sessions on beggars. And so you can understand, last cycle that I did, it was a 6-month story, and and now it's maybe a little bit more. We're closing in on it on the end. So obviously we can't do it justice in only an hour, but I think that we can at least gain something from using that model. And so everyone should bear in mind that I am going to be moving sort of quickly through the story and just focusing on one particular point that is brought out about each of our holy guests, and what does it have to do with Sukkot as a whole. Now, in the framework of the story, I do hope that people are at least somewhat familiar with the story. If you're not, so by all means, and even if you are afterwards, take some time, or during Sukkot itself, sit on each of the days. You can sit and review each of the days, what we call the days of the story. It's also customary to do one of the days of the story at each of the Sheva Brachot, at each of the days of the feasting after a wedding. So it's a nice thing to have the opportunity to go through again and again. Now, it is, in some places, a highly esoteric story. It's the final of Rabbi Nachman's 13 long tales. It encapsulates, it's sort of like the culmination of everything that came before it. And it is a full examination of what we would call Geulat HaPrat v'Geulat HaKlal, the redemption of both the individual and the collective of the Jewish people. And so its range is very, very broad. Now, it has a framework, and all of this whole story is like one story nesting inside of another story, nesting inside of another story. It's very complex, just on the level of the narrative. So some people, when they first come across this story, they're sort of like, I can't even, Hannah says that sound is going in and out. I'm going to shut off the fan, even if it means that I'm going to get a little schwitzy. Hold on. Is that more helpful? Hannah, is it better now? Give me a heads up, please. And please let me know if the sound is okay, and if it's better, worth shutting off the fan, worth the heat. Sounds fine? Okay, good. So let's go back to the story. Now, we have done, over the course of like all of our courses, we've had, over the last couple of years, we've done a lot of courses of greater and lesser length. And I remember, I'm pretty sure that we have touched upon bits and pieces of the stories, of this story before. I think we must have done something about the 6th beggar at some point when talking about Tikkun HaKlali. Because I do remember sending some people the video with the translation of the performance, and so some of it is familiar, even to those who haven't learned the story carefully inside, because if you've been hanging around long enough, so the beggars they have come up before. But let's try and take like the big view, the quick survey view of it, focusing only on each of the qualities of each of the beggars, starting from, I would call, the envelope of the story. I want to call it the envelope because the first layer, the first narrative layer, which encompasses the entirety of the story, which is many people don't realize that it encompasses the entire narrative, because we hear this kind of opening story and then we never hear any more about it. So it seems as though it's a segue or an introduction or a preface into the rest of the tale, but actually it is not that. It is a matafa. It's a kind of, it's a narrative envelope that provides a frame for understanding the rest of the story from its beginning to its end. So we start off with this idea that there is a king who wants to give over his kingship to his son in his lifetime, which is very unusual, because the way it works in monarchies is the king is dead, long live the king, meaning that the new king doesn't get crowned until the old king is dead. And in this case, something unusual is happening. The new king, the young king, is being given the kingship while his father is still alive. Now, what happens to the king when the young king is given kingship? Is he still called the king? Does he retire? Is he like king emeritus? I mean, what is that? So if we bear in mind that we're talking about, as we get closer to Rosh Hashanah, it has relevance, this idea that God's kingship is something that we are partners with. I had a long conversation with my kids, on one child especially on Shabbos, and he had a very hard time getting his head around this idea that in this world you are given Malchut. God wants to give you Malchut in this world, and he wants a partner for Malchut, and so he therefore doesn't force you into being his partner. He gives you an offer. And even though it's true that, I mean, it's Yom Hadin coming up, it is the Day of Judgment, we do have this idea that places where we're responsible to act and we don't do what we're supposed to do, we pay, right? But leave that aside, because this is not the world where people pay. This is the world where we're free to act. And so in this place of being free to act, the king gives over kingship while he's still alive. He remains king, and somehow I'm also king at the same time, with no diminishment of his kingship and no diminishment of my own. Now, at the feast, at this big feast, it's such a place of great simcha. It's so interesting that Rabbi Nachman describes this being a wondrously joyous event. The king is so happy. We say, oh, this is like a parent that launches a child, right, into independence. Like, how joyous is this? It's karuch b'sekanot, we would say. The process of launching a child into independence is filled with danger. What will the child do with his or her freedom and ability to act and this independence? I don't know. But nevertheless, it's a joyous event, because at that moment in time, I have the greatest hopes that the child is going to make use of his or her own malchut, this power of rulership and kingship, which is invested within him or her, because by virtue of the divine spark that's inside of them. So as I launch the child, or as Hashem, so to speak, launches us into existence, it's very, very joyous. It's a big celebration, and that's one of the reasons why Rosh Hashanah is a day of celebration, a day of feasting, a day of joy, even though it's a very serious day also. And we see that in the first level of the narrative, in the middle of the feast, in the middle of the festivities, the king turns to his son, and he says, now, I've consulted with my chozim b'kochavim, my astrologers and my prognosticators, and you know, I'll tell you right now, you're going to come down. You're going to lose the monarchy. And I want to warn you, this is at the height of the celebration and in public, I want to warn you that you should just make sure not to fall into despair. And if you're going to stay happy, you know, if you're going to stay happy, if you're going to stay happy, I'm going to be very happy. Now, if you fall into despair, I'm still going to remain happy, because that'll be a sign that you didn't deserve your monarchy. And so I'm glad that you won't have it, if you're the type of person who, when losing his monarchy, falls into despair. But if you hold strong and you stay happy, I'm going to be very happy. Okay. Now, that's the opening. After that, the new king takes over the Malchut. He enters his role, and upon entering his role, he's very wise, and so he engages all kinds of philosophers and wise men, and everyone, and he loves philosophy, and he loves to, you know, like he loves to immerse himself in wisdom. And what happens after he immerses himself very fully in philosophy is he encourages all the people in his country also to do so. And so in the end, they all become atheists. And they're so we'll say like the higher echelons, you know, of society, they become atheists. And Rabbi Nachman says, and they lost the tachsisei milchama. Now, and it says the young king, the new king, he regretted how he had fallen away from his father's ways, and he moaned and groaned over it. He had a lot of regrets, but nevertheless, as a king, his atheism and his total immersion in pursuing philosophy led him to leave aside what Rabbi Nachman calls the tachsisei milchama. He let go of the strategies of war. That means to say, if we say the main job of a king is to protect his people, so he failed in this. Now, that's it. That's the beginning of the first narrative envelope. Now, the second one opens. It's like scene, whenever Act 1, Scene 2. The second one opens with this description of it once happened that there was a certain flight from a certain country and everybody fled and there was displacement and refugees, and a little boy and a little girl got separated from their families and wound up in the woods all by themselves. And they were struggling and starving. Little boy of 5 or 6, little girl 5 or 6, and they all only had each other. Now, we say obviously the pathway from narrative envelope 1 to narrative envelope 2, meaning now we go another layer in, is not that they're irrelevant to each other, but actually they're very deeply related, because the kingdom had lost its ability to its mastery of the strategies of war, which Rabbi Nachman, that's his way of saying they lost their simple faith, which really gives people such power. Faith is a powerful tool to keep us strong. And anybody who wants to explore that idea further can go read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, which is a famous work on the subject of how faith and a sense of meaning, not only faith, he also includes meaning and other things, but how it's a powerful force within human beings. And so the hyper-intellectual development and a drifting away from the sense of meaning and faith in life and its purpose is something that actually was very weakening. And so everyone fled. So we see that the first narrative envelope 1 and the second layer are actually related, because presumably these two little children get separated from their families and wind up as lost little souls in the middle of the woods in danger and starving. It's just a direct result of something important having gone lost. And so now they're very vulnerable. And as they're crying, because they're little children, they're crying and begging, and they have nothing they're 4 or 5 years old, and they're lost, and they have nothing to eat. And so they just start to cry. And suddenly this beggar appears. And this beggar starts to have this conversation. They follow him around. He has a bag, a sack with bread. He shares his bread with them. And they start asking him questions once they've satisfied their hunger a little bit. How'd you get here? And he asks them, how did you get? They don't know anything. They're just like little wandering souls. And at a certain point they realize he's blind. And that makes them wonder, because they're thinking, how did he find his way here if he's blind? Like that, they're smart enough to realize that. In any case, he gives them bread. He takes care of them for a while. And then they ask if he can take them with him, and he starts to walk away, and he leaves them. And instead of taking them with him, he gives them a bracha. He gives them a blessing that they should be like him. And he doesn't explain himself too much. He says, you should be like me, which they think, what? He's blind. He's blessing us with his blindness. You should be old like me. He's very old. And then he leaves them. Now, he left them with extra bread, which is enough to get them till the next stage. And everybody likes to ask the question, why does he leave them? Why does he leave them? Even if he's leaving them with some provision. I mean, shouldn't he rescue them and take them out of the woods? And we're going to see all of the beggars. They meet 7 beggars in the woods. Each one of them gives them a bit of bread, gives them a blessing, and then they leave. So this is very consistent with Rabbi Nachman's recurring theme of our interaction with tzaddikim being a kind of progressive journey. And different people have positive influences on us, and even great people have positive influences on us that have, and that's called the sharing of the bread, is da'at, is holy awareness. They give us what they can give us, but they can't necessarily take us along with them, because they have their own journey to take and we have ours. and we have other people still that we need to meet, and we have other places that we need to go. So even though it feels very threatening, because in the story it's like, oh, the night falls and they're still children in the woods. All they have is this little bit of bread, and how will they be taken care of? And of course, he's describing in a very vivid way the feeling of spiritual abandonment that we sometimes, as seekers, we sometimes feel when we say, oh, I went to this shiur for like however many years, and I was close with this person, and then like the relationship didn't continue, and the feeling of like the vacuum, and what it feels like to know that you need help and to reach out and be seeking da'at, some understanding of Hashem and some God awareness, and not necessarily having someone to supply it right away. And that feeling of a vacuum, and a vacuum is very interesting because it's like nature pouring a vacuum is a physical fact, but spiritually it means that when there's emptiness, it's possible to draw something new into the place of the emptiness, because that's the way a vacuum works, right? I tried to explain once to my children how going to the doctor to get blood drawn actually works like in a physical way, because they're like, how does that thing, like no one's sucking the blood out of you, like how does the blood get it just flows into the tube? I was like, it's a vacuum tube. Huh? They don't learn about this in school, I guess, but trying to explain the idea of the vacuum drawing into itself something from outside of itself, that's its physical nature. And so the fact that these two children who are in an early stage of development, that the tzaddikim give them a little something, like more than a crumb. It's like a loaf, it's a lot. But as they go and move through their journey in the woods, they're going to have the same experience over and over again, 7 times, of meeting up with this kind of a tzaddik, and then another kind of a tzaddik, and then another kind of a tzaddik, each one of whom has his own special quality, that they receive a blessing, that they should be like him, but nothing is really articulated fully. They don't necessarily even understand it because they're too young. Now, in the course of the story, we're still in narrative envelope number 2. So I hope am I still keeping everyone attached? Like, have I lost you already, or are you still with me? Please. The Beggars is a complicated sort of event. Is everybody okay? You halten cup, as we say? Is everybody's head screwed on tight? Because it's very it's an interesting journey. You with? Yes? Okay, good. So let's go on. So these little children, they get what they need, but only stage by stage. Each stage, at every stage, they cry and yearn, that they just call out that their needs should be met. And then magically, as soon as they're magically, the next beggar appears. And so they meet a blind beggar. Let's go through the list. The blind beggar, the deaf beggar, the mute beggar, the beggar with the crooked neck, the beggar with the hunched back, the beggar without hands, and the beggar without feet. Okay, so those are our 7 beggars. Now, each of them appear to have a severe defect. That's the way the children relate to them at that stage. Now, as the children grow, eventually they find their way out of the woods. They start to become beggars. They join forces. They're together. They rely upon each other. And they're sort of cute, like they're a pair. So they're very successful. They go around and they beg and they get what they need. And they have become beggars, like the beggars who saved their lives. And they get adopted sort of by this group of beggars, itinerant beggars, and who go from simcha to simcha and eat at other people's weddings. And, I'm in Yerushalayim, so, this still happens. I made a bar mitzvah recently in Zville, which is a hall that's, pretty simple hall. And, like, sure enough, in the middle of the Suda, people just walk in, sit down at a table, and start eating. And like that's, so it goes. So people who don't have show up at the hall and sit down, and you say, oh, can I get you anything? And, take care of them. And so it goes. So the beggar comes, and they become part of this band of beggars, and they move around from place to place. And then at a certain point, their fellow beggars say, wait a second, let's make a shidduch. These two should get married. Okay. So they're going to get married. They make the match. And they want to make a chasana. How are you supposed to make a wedding if you haven't got any money? So it says, Rabbi Nachman says, they dug a pit in the ground, and they covered the top of it with leaves and branches and other refuse from the garden. And if anybody recognizes the reference, the schach that covers the sukkah is called in the Talmud mipsolet agorim. It's the refuse from your vineyard. It means to say the vines and everything that's been cut down off of the branches, off of the main part of the grapevine in preparation for the winter, because the harvest is already in. And so you take from Psolet Hagorin and you lay it over the pit and you make a wedding. And they went to different events and they went to different feasts and they collected food and they made for themselves a party, make a chasana. Now, the boy and the girl, who are now the young man and we'll call them the chassan and the kala, at their own wedding. So at a certain point in the festivities where everyone's so happy, which is also, like in terms of a literary device, a holy literary device, of course, this is reminiscent. It's an inversion of the great feast at the beginning of the story where there's this terrible foreshadowing of disaster to come, right? And when the new king, when the son is being given the kingship during his father's kingdom, and right at the height of the festivities, it's like the, I call it like it's like the evil witch showing up at the princess's wedding, right? It's like a kind of, reminiscent of one of these images from Grimm's fairy tales, and something comes to destroy the joy. Now here we have an inversion of that. Everything is very, we would say it's degraded, right, in a certain way, that the environment is very degraded. It's not like there's kapelli, as Rabbi Nachman at the beginning of the story goes on and on about the choirs and the comedians and the plays and the food and it's also grand and beautiful, and in the end that falls apart. And we get thrown forward into this party, which is like in the ground, it's happening underground, but it's truly a joyous occasion. Now, we have a way of contrasting in the historic periods of the Jewish people also, Rabbi Nachman is referring to this, that at the heights of the Jewish people's greatness, when we had prophets and kings, and things were beautiful, we had a Beit HaMikdash, so everything fell apart, that stuff didn't last. But we look forward to a time when, even though we've all become beggars to a certain extent and we're eating the crumbs, it is possible to pick ourselves up and bring ourselves to a state of simcha, of joy, that helps to heal from the damage that was caused at the beginning. Now, I just dropped like a big idea on you. I hope everybody is still following me, because it's really something that in most of the commentaries on the story is not really described explicitly. It's something that you need to infer. So this arc between the feast at the beginning and the feast of the beggars, of the wedding feast of the children, they're clearly parallel to one another, but it's interesting to contemplate in what way they reflect upon each other, because they're like inversions of each other. Now, at this wedding feast, so at the height of the simcha, the chassan and kala yearn. They start to express their yearning. Oh, if only the blind beggar who saved us, that first beggar who came and saved us when we were starving in the woods, if only he were here to celebrate with us, our joy would be complete. And of course, this is the recurring theme. Rabbi Nachman says, "Mitoch kach." This is a very famous line in Rabbi Nachman's stories. And right in the middle, right, and just as they express that, then hineni, the beggar shows up, the blind beggar shows up. He says, "Here I am. I'm here to celebrate with you." So as a recurring theme, it's important to realize that this idea of the invitation, it's your Ushpizin. You're going to have a sukkah, Bezrat Hashem, and every day you're going to recite an invitation. And the idea, it's b'matu minach, right? Ushpizin ila'in, Ushpizin demei menusa. The holy guests of faith. We have a whole nusach. We have a whole, open your machzer or your siddur, and you're going to find in the special prayers for Sukkot the actual text of the prayers that we say, inviting each of the beggars in. Now, why are they called beggars? I mean, they're tzaddikim. Are they tzaddikim? Are they beggars? And the answer is that in this world, the prime state of a tzaddik is that he is a beggar. In Yiddish, you say a bettler. Not a beggar, a bettler. Now, that means a beggar. But in Yiddish, the word beten, to beg, has a double meaning. Beten means not only to ask something of someone, but it means to pray. So, to beseech, to pray. It's a very evocative word. Rabbi Nachman called these a Zibben Bettlerin, or Zibben Bettlers. So we have our 7 beggars, our 7 masters of prayer. It's very interesting because the story, the 12th story that comes before this 13th one, is called the Master of Prayer. And it also goes through all of the attributes. Here we find that the beggars are really fully articulated. We get to learn a lot about their unique qualities. Now, each of their apparent defects we're going to discover throughout the 7 days of the festivities, as each one is summoned, each of the days of the Sheva Brachot, right? So on that first day, oh, if only the blind beggar would be here with us, our joy would be complete. And Hineni, here I am. He shows up. And Rabbi Nachman says he kisses them. It's an interesting image, you know. You'd think a Hasidic Rebbe wouldn't talk about the tzaddik kissing the chassan and the kala. But it being a story, it's important for us to understand the nature of this kiss. And when it says he kissed them, it means he entered into a state of what we would call yichud. Now, in the deeper language of Kabbalah, so we have different stages of being in a state of unity with another. Now, in terms of being in a state of unity with a tzaddik, so there is something called a yehuda called neshikin. It's called kissing. Like for instance, right now, I am telling you over and hopefully trying to explain somewhat a story that Rabbi Nachman himself created, channeled, and told 200 years ago, a bit more than 200 years ago. Now, Rabbi Nachman is buried in Uman, and he stays alive in many ways. And one of the ways in which he stays alive is when people like you and me, when we open up his works and we learn them. So, according to the sages, this is called a zivug of neshikin. It's called a state of unity called kissing, not the state of unity called full joining, which is equivalent to a type of, well, I mean, I'm not going to, it's like intimate contact. Kissing is also very intimate, but it's at the level of the mouth. It's not at the level of the embrace of the whole body. Now, it says that in Shir HaShirim, it says, Dovev siftei yeshenim, that the lips of the sleepers flutter. And the sages remarked on this in the Medrash on Shir HaShirim, that when we learn the works of the righteous, siftotav dovavot b'kever, his lips flutter in the grave. Now, the idea of lips fluttering in the grave means, here's my mouth. I'm teaching Rabbi Nachman's story to you. The way in which he stays speaking in this world is when a live person actually articulates the teaching that he has provided. And so this is called, on a soul level, that I am in a state right now of yichud with Rabbi Nachman because I'm sharing his teachings. It's a very big zchut. I'm very happy. I teach Rashi, I teach Ramban, teach Maharal, teach all kinds of different things. I'm very happy to do so. Ben Ish Chai, Rav Hirsch, I don't know what, and the Torah itself. And so the state of unity that takes place on the spiritual plane with a tzaddik, when you're sharing his teachings, is very, very profound. Now, when it says that the tzaddikim, each one of these beggars, when they come to the wedding, they kiss the couple. So it's the idea, and they give them a gift. Now, this is the clincher. When they were little children in the woods, they got a blessing. You should be like me. In the case of the blind beggar, you should be old like me. In the case of the deaf beggar, you should have a good life like me, and so on. We'll see what each of their qualities is. But the difference between a bracha, a blessing, and a gift, because at the wedding, when they show up for the Sheva Brachot, they say, at first I gave you a blessing, but now I'm going to give it to you as a wedding gift. So one of the ways we understand this is because they've grown up and because they've married, there's now a kli. There's enough of a vessel for what used to be only a potential blessing now to actually develop into a gift. See, there's a difference between a bracha and a matana. A bracha means, I wish it for you. Ich wünsch euch. It's a very nice way to say it. I wish for you. That's a bracha. But a gift means I have something and I'm able to give it to you. Now, on Sukkot, as we invite in each of the Ushpizin, something very important is happening. Through yearning and desire to connect with and actualize and to live with each of the perfected attributes of the tzaddikim, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, Yosef, and David. Now, I just went according to Nusach Sfard. Nusach Ashkenaz switches it a little bit, but I'm going to go according to Nusach Sfard because that's also the model that Rabbi Nachman worked with, the Hasidim do, and also Sfardim. And so That's the model that I'm going to go with. And if your sitter reverses things or inverts them, I can only go with what I know and the way we practice. And so, but you can adapt accordingly. Now, the idea of in the sukkah, when you're eating, remember, it's like a wedding feast that lasts for 7 days. So you wash and you sit down, and as you're beginning your meal, you do this invitation. And as we invite them in, the idea of the invitation is, oh, halavai, here I'm surrounded by the light of the sukkah. It's really a very big light. And it's like all these things that I aspire to and I yearn for and I would love to be able to reach. They stand outside of me. They're called what we call makifin. They're external to me still, but I yearn for them and I want to bring them inside of me. And think about the interrelationship, even though I wasn't going to talk about this, but, think about the difference between a sukkah and your lulav and esrog, your four species that you wave around and shake around like a good Jew on Sukkot. Now the motion, I'm going to move over so hopefully you'll be able to see better. Your sukkah surrounds you, but the motion of your arba minim, it's like you're holding it like a sword. It's called a sword. And you're holding together all of your minim until it's what's called an aguda achat, a single unit, a single entity. And the motion is actually, people will like shake it, kacha, but it's not really the motion. The motion is like this. The shaking is meant to be a drawing in and a drawing in. And so you go 6 directionals, right? You do all 6 directionals because you're really trying to bring in to the self, inside of ourselves, all of the good things that on Sukkot, it's the Chag HaAsif. Sukkot is the ingathering of the fruits. And the idea is that, as someone said in class today, was great. She said, when you play Monopoly, so like you go around the corner of the board, which is the starting point, come back to that starting point. It's like you get $200, right? And nobody likes the jail card, go to jail, because like do not pass go, do not collect $200. But let's say in the normal course of events when you're playing this game, you pass go, means to say you've done the full circuit. So you finish the cycle of festivals of Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. You come to the end of that cycle, which is the renewal of the year. You get $200. It doesn't mean you get $200. It means you have gifts, fruits that it's time to bring in. So the spiritual work of Sukkot is about harvesting and reaping spiritually all of the stuff that actually has been merely aspirational for you through the course of the last year. That's a very powerful idea to enter the sukkah with. Like you have a physical structure that is the embodiment of your what we call makifin, your aspirational self. And throughout Sukkot, you get to break it down into 7 different days. But as you work through each and every day, we have this beautiful tradition of the invitation of the qualities that we aspire to. And we literally invite them in. Now, in inviting them in, it's just like in the story where they're at the wedding, at the feast, and they say, oh, if only he could be here with us. And then from the expression of the yearning, it's like, oh, no, here I am. And guess what? I have a gift for you. I blessed you before. I was hoping for good things for you, but now that you're married, it means to say now that you've come to a degree of shleimut, that you have a kli, you have a vessel that can contain the blessing that I gave you. Oh, now it's a gift. Now, our blind beggar, let's go through each of their qualities. And we don't have a lot of time. So really, this is more like an introduction. And I really hope that during Sukkot, before Sukkot, during Sukkot, open up the book. Breslov Research Institute did a nice, Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan Zatzal did a very beautiful translation with also some notation. Open it up, sit in your sukkah, and go day by day and see what you get. Now, the stories are quite challenging. Don't try and read the whole thing at once, but if you do it day by day, you can pick up a lot. Now, I want to go through their qualities very, very briefly because we don't have a lot of time. But it's the kind of thing that I hope everyone will take hold of and go with it, during Sukkot. I hope everybody will. Now, so let's move forward because they're making here we go. Here's our blind beggar. So our blind beggar says, I came to the wedding. This was, by the way, this version, I pulled off, this translation I pulled off of Rev Ginsburg's website, inner.org. Rev Ginsburg, he's Chabad, but he has a great respect for Rabbi Nachman and often teaches from its teachings. So it's a very nice translation. So if you want to be able to see it online, you don't have the book, you can get it from inner.org. Just look around on there or do a search for some beggars. It's a good translation. But it doesn't have notes. You can listen to his shiur, though, because there is a class on it. So, that's another possibility. Okay, so the first thing is, here comes the blind beggar. And he says, and they all do this, meaning the unfolding of the story or all of these sub-stories is basically the same theme over and over again. Each one of them, of the beggars, the tzaddikim, the bettlers, right? They're big prayers. They are big prayers, and they taught the children how to be big prayers, meaning from them they learned how to be beggars, bettlers also. And each one of them has a unique quality. Now, the unique quality actually to our eyes appears to be a defect. So let's look at the blind beggar. Now, when it happens to be the blind beggar, we'll start with him. So the blind beggar tells them, you think I'm blind? I'm not blind at all. Which is a surprise to us because he certainly appears to be blind. He says, no, I'm not blind at all. Really, my quality is that I have an exceedingly long life. And because of that, I appear to be blind. And the way he explains it is as follows. It's very, very fascinating. He says, I am so long-lived that all of the life of this world passes before me in the blink of an eye. Meaning, what he means to say is, the life of this world is, it's impermanent. It's temporary. Because of that, he blinks his eye, and it's gone. So he has a certain consciousness. He has that. Remember, he gave them bread. That the life of this world is extremely brief. And he says, here, watch this. You think I'm blind. In fact, I'm not blind at all. It's just that all the time that the world has been in existence is no longer for me than the wink of an eye. So he's not blind. His eyes are open. But the life of this world, which is temporary, goes by so quickly in his great longevity that when we're looking at him, it's as if we have passed by him in the wink of an eye. From his perspective, his eyes have been open before and after, right? But the life of this world went by in the blink of an eye. Now that's very interesting because it means his eyes are open to that which came before and that which comes after. And the stuff that we call reality goes by so quickly that he doesn't even register it. Now, the idea of being aware of or eyes open to that which was before and that which is after. You see, we say it every day. Adon Olam Asher Malach B'Terem Kol Yitzir Nivra. God was the master of the universe before there was any creation whatsoever. And then we say, Va'acharei kichlot hakol levado yimloch nora. And after everything ceases to be, he alone, Yimloch Nora, he will rule awesomely. Now, what does that mean? It means there's something called before, what's called Lifnei HaBriah, in which there was nothing but God. And then there is, from our perspective, what's called Acharei HaBriah, after creation, when everything rejoins up with its source and becomes unified with God. That's called there's nothing but God. And in the interim, there's the illusion that the universe has some kind of an independent existence from God, which can be very confusing. Rabbi Nachman used the term, you have to close your eyes, michezu d'hai alma, that it's a necessary practice if you want to live a spiritual life to learn how to close your eyes to the illusions of this world. And the first thing, obviously, you need to go to work, you need to live with other people, you have you need to eat and drink and do all the things that human beings do with a body. So it doesn't mean that you go off and do, sit under the banyan tree until you merge with the eternal. It means that it means that we're supposed to have the awareness that that in truth, there is nothing but Hashem. And the way that we normally do this, Rabbi Nachman says you have to close your eyes. Because if you close your eyes, then you don't see all the distracting stuff and you're able to focus your mind on the fact that there's nothing but Hashem. And we do this every day, several times a day. When do we do it? When do we blind ourselves to the things of this world in order to attain consciousness that there is nothing but God? We do it several times a day. It's called saying Shema. Okay? So we say Shema, we cover our eyes. The idea of closing our eyes during Shema is because as human beings, we are not able to simultaneously focus on the physicality of this world and also on the actuality of this world. So we close our eyes. So the blind beggar has a gift to give us. Now he's associated with whom? Right, so I said don't pay attention so much to the order because it's a nice little question. Which of our Ushpizin is he associated with? You'd think in terms of the order it should be Avraham. And there is a good association with that because it says Avraham Zakein Babi Yamim, that Avram was aged, right? He was old, Babi Yamim. He was well full with his days. So longevity, we do have an association with Avram Avinu, but we have a different association with the blind beggar, a blind tzaddik, which is of course Yitzchak, right? So Yitzchak, who came down from the Akedah, blinded, or the other opinion that Rashi brings is that he got blinded later in life from the smoke of the idolatry of his child's wives. So either way, Yitzchak, maybe we're talking about Yitzchak, maybe we're talking about Avraham. And I recommend that anybody who gets Rabbi Kaplan's, if you have Rabbi Kaplan's translation and notes, you can sit and think that one out, which one we're really talking about. So we have our blind beggar and his quality. Now, next, let's move forward. Wow, it's really hot in here without a fan. Oh my goodness. Let me take a drink. 1 second. I made a bracha before. Okay, let's go on. No, I'm not going to put on the fan. I have ice water. I forgot that I have it. My husband was really kind and he brought me ice water before we started. Okay, so let's move forward. Now, our deaf beggar. So the same thing happens on the second day of the festivities. And they say, oh, if only the deaf beggar could be with us, like he saved our life, and what would we have done without him? And so they're going back again, right? And as soon as they express this yearning and they cry for him and beg for him, what happens? Here I am. I've come to celebrate with you. So same thing happens again, right? He says, I have a gift to give you. Here it is, on the second of the 7 days. And they're yearning and yearning. He says, okay. Now, he says, I want to give you a present that you'll be like me. Now, what's his quality, right? You should have a good life like mine, a very good life. I first gave it to you as a blessing. Now I'm giving you as a gift. Now, here's our same theme. You think that I'm deaf, meaning that which appears to be the defect actually is the perfection of something. Just like the fact that the blind beggar can see what was before and what was after, meaning he has his eyes open to the ever-presence of Hashem, and the stuff that he doesn't look at makes him appear to us as if he's blind, because he's blind to the stuff that we're so preoccupied with. But his eyes are wide open to the thing that's really important. So who's blind, right? He obviously is not blind. He can see very well. He sees better than we do. Now, when it comes to the deaf beggar, same thing. He says, I'm not deaf at all. It's just that I don't have ears to listen to all of what Rabbi Nachman calls the chesronos, all of the lackings of this world. And he says, he uses a phrase about, he says that, like there's all this noise in the world and it's all generated by everything that people lack. Now, what he's talking about is like literally that everybody's always putting up a lot of static and making a lot of noise about like, oh, I need this, I want this, I should have this, they should have done this, this one owes me, that one owes me, da 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 da, right? So that generates a kind of what's called in the deeper works a kol havara. Rabbi Nachman also speaks about it as like this kind of chaotic sound of the whole world kind of like barking all the time. Have. Dogs in every culture, they bark differently, just like roosters in every culture, they wake up differently, right? So in America, it's cock-a-doodle-doo, and in Israel, it's cuckoo, whatever. So I don't know in France how the roosters are in Spain, but I'm sure they have a different way to crow. So when it comes to dogs, so in America, we say woof, woof, and we say bow, wow, right? Or whenever, arf, arf. We have like our cultural constant of the dog noise. But in Israel, it refers back to the Aramaic. In Jewish culture, it goes back to the Aramaic, and it's called hav, 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 hav. And hav in Aramaic means give, 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 give. Gimme, gimme, gimme. Now, so what he's telling us is like the sound of this, like kind of this barking, echoing noise that the world is filled with because everybody just wants and wants, and everyone's crying, gimme, gimme, gimme. So the deaf beggar says, I don't hear this. So I have a really good life because I'm not missing anything because everybody's so preoccupied with what they don't have. So I don't have space in my ears for all of this noise of everybody crying out for all the stuff that they're missing. It doesn't mean he doesn't do chesed. That's not what we're talking about. He's talking about like a person being so preoccupied always with that which is empty that they have no sense of that which is full. And this makes sense. The fact that it's in the language of deafness or noise makes a lot of sense because it's the empty vessel that makes a lot of noise, right? So the sages said. Now, when he talks about the empty vessel making a lot of noise, or that people's lacks generate all this noise, he's actually alluding to a very deep Kabbalistic idea, which is that before the universe was created, meaning when the concept of the creation of an other, something other than God himself, arises in the mind of God, so to speak. So the first stage of proto-creation, which is purely talking about spiritual concepts, not talking about anything that's, physical. So the first thing that's generated is what's called a halal hapanui, a vacated space. Why? Because you have to have some space has to be cleared, conceptual space, in order for something to exist other than God. If God's taking up all the space, if everything is only God and he's all pervasive, and there's no room for anything else to exist. So it's like he sort of obliterates everything else. Cannot be something else. So first is the vacated space. It's a common theme. It comes up in many places and throughout Torah literature. It's a Kabbalistic idea. It has very, very significant practical applications, because that's the way of Hasidus, is not to leave Kabbalistic ideas in the realm of theory, but to bring them down into the realm of human realities, right? They do have to do with me. And so this idea of the Halal Panui is very interesting. One way to look at it is like this. You see, it's not empty. Space is not empty. Leit atar panui mineh, right? There's no place that's devoid of the presence of God. But the nature of the vacated space is that it appears to be empty. So within that the so-called vacated space, it's like all of the worlds develop and all of reality exists, and it exists here in this place where God's presence is concealed somehow. Paradoxical. He is both here and not making himself available, not making himself apparent here. Okay, so that's the tension and necessary paradox of the existence of the vacated space. And it comes up in many different contexts. Very important idea, very basic idea. Now, I just said it in a nutshell as if it's like, oh, this is an easy idea. It's really not an easy idea, so I'm just throwing it out there. Now, one of the things that's interesting about it is that if we envision this vacated space mamash like a big chamber, so we all know if you're standing in a big chamber, there's nothing there, and you call out. So the sound bounces around, makes a lot of noise. If you put two people in there, you start to make noise. It's pretty loud fast. When you put 3 people, 4 people, it's like, so meaning it's the emptiness of the space that generates all the noise. And when you fill a space, with furniture and with rugs and bookshelves and I don't know what, all kinds of substance, which helps to absorb the sound, but it's the fullness or the filling of the space that actually makes the din drop, right? That's just standard rules of acoustics. So one of the things that the deaf beggar is alluding to is the fact that he doesn't hear all of this din, because din is only generated in the place of half of gimme gimme because something feels empty. When there's no sensation or no consciousness of the presence of Hashem, nothing is satisfying. Everything is very empty. And it's in the state of emptiness that all this, we'll call it psychic din is produced. And he says, I don't hear any of this. My ears it doesn't go in. And one of the ways we can understand it is because for him, the space is filled. It's not empty space. So imagine, can the noise bounce around in his internal halal panui? No, because it's not panui. It's not empty. It's full. Okay. So he says, I want you to have a good life. And he's going to bring, like all the beggars, a whole proof and a story, a sub-story, an example that proves the fact that he really does have this quality, which we're skipping over because that's really the complexity of the story. And he says, I have this really good life. I want to share it with you. He needs to say that you won't feel any lack. So the long life is the idea of having awareness only of that which was before and that which is after. That means to say, and the stuff that makes me distracted from this knowledge of Einod Milvado, that's nothing but Hashem, that I should not pay any attention to that. So that is the blessing and the gift of the blind beggar. The deaf beggar has everything. His Chalal HaPanui is full, not because he has stuff, but because he has God presence in it. And so therefore there's no space for the bouncing sound of gimme, gimme to echo around in that chamber, because there's no empty chamber there at all. And so he says, I want you to have a good life, and I'm going to give you the tools. And that's the thing. Remember I said it's the Neshikin. He kisses them, and he says, I'm giving you more than a blessing. I'm giving you a gift. He means to say, by virtue of da'at, of awareness, of spiritual inheritance that was passed down to us from our forefathers and from all of these tzaddikim throughout all of the generations. So we've been given tools and gifts and kisses, of contact and awareness that are the way that we get to actualize all of these beautiful gifts that they have to give to us. Okay, let me go further. So then we have our beggar. Let's move forward. 1 second. Here. Our Kvad HaPeh. Yeah, this is still our deaf beggar. Move forward. Sorry. The Kvad HaPeh, our mute beggar, it's a bad translation, because the Kvad HaPeh literally means the heavy of speech. And of course we have our Kvad HaPeh. Who's our ultimate Kvad HaPeh? Our heavy of speech is Moshe, right? Now, that's a paradox, right? Because, obviously, Moshe Rabbeinu has nothing wrong with his mouth. He's the only human being about which it is said, Pe el pe adaber bo. God said about him, I speak to him mouth to mouth. Presumably, there's nothing wrong with Moshe's mouth. So the quality of Kvad HaPeh, which actually is spoken about by other tzaddikim, the Sfat Emet speaks about it also, is to have a kind of gravity. That's the kvad, that's the kvedut, gravity, Dina Tova wants to know who's the deaf beggar aligned with Ushpizin. So it's a good question. I'll tell you who's clear, okay? I'll tell you who's clear, and then we can figure out the missing pieces. David HaMelech is for sure the beggar without feet. So that's number one. Yosef HaTzadik is for sure the beggar without hands. Yaakov is probably the beggar with the hunched back. The crooked neck beggar is probably Aharon. Our Kvad HaPeh, our deaf beggar is Min Hastam Moshe. That's the closest association. And so the only two where we have a question is Avram and Yitzchak about the blind and the deaf beggar. And the usual association, the closer one, is probably that the blind beggar is Abraham and the deaf beggar is Yitzchak, but you could argue it in two different directions, and I'm not going to define it. Because we could look at it in different ways. Okay, shall we go on? Everyone still with me? We're going to go on for a few minutes. I'm not going to go through all of them. You can see we won't be able to manage. But I'm giving you a good start so that you'll be able to continue during Sukkot. Now, our Kvad HaPeh. So he says, same thing, he's speaking to them. How can he be speaking to them if he's a mute beggar? He's not mute. He says, I want to give you a gift. And what's my gift? He says, I have the most fantastic power of speech in the world, and you should be like me. And everything that I speak, right? I have a power in my speech that anybody would want to listen to me. Like, I have all of the speech in the world. But he says, why do I appear to be that I don't speak well? It's because anything that's not praise of Hashem is not complete. So I only can say words that are the genuine expressions of the greatness of Hashem. And because in the environment of this world, it is so difficult, it's so difficult to get across the communication of the greatness of Hashem, because people are always like preoccupied with nonsense. And he has a very long subsection in his story. He says that's the quality that I have to give with you, is that your speech should be filled with that he can speak the most wonderful poetry in verse, which contains within it all the wisdom of the world. He used to say to use the mouth for expressing always shvachot of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's the gift, that you should be like me. So that's our Kvar beggar. If we move forward, so our next one is the beggar of the crooked neck. The beggar of the crooked neck, his quality that he can do is he can make any noise, and he can make says his neck is, he says, my neck is not crooked at all, it's perfectly straight. How come it appears to be crooked? Because there's all kinds of havalim, that's the actual language, vapors it says here, but it means havalim. The world is full of hevel, it's full of of foolishness that people are so busy with, and so my neck appears to be crooked as if I'm not taking it in. It's like as if I'm creating obstacles so that it doesn't enter into me. But really it's completely straight. And he says, and I have a beautiful voice. I can make any sound. This is not like the Kvar Peh. The Kvar Peh, he says he can speak, articulated speech. The beggar of the crooked neck, he's just in the realm of making sounds. He can make any sound. He can sound like any bird in the world or any instrument in the world. He can throw his voice. He can do wondrous things with his neck. It's called his neck. Why? Because you have neck as the bridge. I said it's associated, our crooked neck, with Aaron. So what does Aaron have to do with the crooked neck? Well, think about it like this. You have here your head, your mochin, and then you have your body where you actualize and bring everything down into the realm of action. And the bridge that you have between them is the neck. Now, the idea of the crooked neck, that there's some place or some area of service of God where it's possible to bridge consciousness of Hashem with the actuality of serving Hashem down here in this world, even through physical things. Our best exemplar of this is Aaron. Why? Because he's the Kohen who serves in the Beit HaMikdash, which is the place where it says, heaven and earth kiss. That means to say, the upper world, the realm of just knowledge of Hashem and awareness of Hashem, has to make its way down via many channels into the place of actually touching ground and being manifest in the world of action. And so that's, Aaron HaKohen is our great example of this, is the Kohen who is working and doing service in a physical structure, in a physical way, and he's doing avodat shamayim. He's doing the work of heaven. The mystery of how in the Beit HaMikdash, in the Mishkan of the Beit HaMikdash, how, that's the deepest mystery of the avodat Beit HaMikdash, is that it parallels the service of angels, and that it parallels also the workings of all of the universe. I mean, that's its mystery. And so that's the job of the neck, because it's the bridge. It's the place of the bridge of heaven and earth. So it appears to be so twisted. It's like, but this world is so full of garbage. I mean, how are you supposed to be able to do this? And he says, no. My neck is completely straight, and I have a very beautiful voice. And the way that he speaks about his voice, he doesn't, not about speech, but about the voice. He can make sounds, and his proof for being able to do this avodah is that he's able to join together through throwing his voice two very distant places, and these two birds in two different countries who, if they would only get together, everything would be perfect. And so this image of him using the power of this bridge to be able to join together HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Jewish people, the Shechina and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that work of making the bridge, of being the bridge, this is really the work of Aaron HaKohen, which we also know. Because one way we speak about Aaron, when it says in Pirkei Avot, you should be like Aaron, like the students of Aaron. So what does it say? He was an Ohev Shalom v'Rodev Shalom. He was someone who loved peace and pursued peace, and he brought people together, husbands and wives, and people and their fellow, and their neighbors, etc. And he did it by throwing his voice. Actually, the language that we have from the sages is that he would, in throwing his voice, he would say, say to one, you know, so-and-so wants to reconcile with you, even though the other one hadn't expressed it. And he would say to the other one, you know, so-and-so, he wants to reconcile with you. And in this way, he would bring together two who had separated, bring them to a place of shalom through what we would call throwing your voice. Now, what's the throwing of the voice? Like, what's ventriloquism? It's a kind of a lie, right? We say for darkei shalom, for the purpose of peace, you're allowed to be mishaneh. It doesn't say you're allowed to be mishaker, you're allowed to lie. It says you're allowed to sometimes fudge it a little bit in order to bring about the joining together of two people who are separated from each other to make shalom. So we say that's Aaron HaKohen's quality, is to use the power of his ability to throw, to project. He can draw people together, and in drawing people together, he also can draw the heavens and the earth together, to draw God and the Jewish people together, right? Now, should we go on? We'll take another few minutes, quickly, because it's already late. So our next beggar is our hunchback beggar. And they go through the same process with him, of begging for him until he shows up right away. And then he says, I have this quality. I have a quality to give, what it's called little holding much. And he says, you know, I appear to have this hunchback. You know, the idea of the hunchback is as if the back can't bear anything at all. And the hunchback beggar, he actually can bear so much. He says, I have the quality of little holding much, which means I have great places. I actually have a really, really strong back, big, broad shoulders. And I have the fullness of this quality of what we call little holding much. Now, little holding much is a concept that comes up in the Midrashic literature and in the Talmud. It says the Beit HaMikdash had the quality of little holding much, meaning a small, you know, a circumscribed amount of space, but that magically, mysteriously, miraculously, was able to stretch and accommodate the multitudes of Jews who came for the festivals, even though spatially it shouldn't have been able to do it. Now we have the concept of little holding much in Eretz Yisrael as a whole, right? We have the concept of little holding much as you get closer and closer to the Kodesh HaKodashim. That concept gets more and more expanded, because we even have the idea that at a certain point all the Jewish people could fit between the space between the two poles of the ark. And so we understand that it's referring to the idea that in spiritual dimensions, well, in spirituality, the dimension doesn't matter, right? In spirituality, space doesn't matter. Now, Reb Nosson explains that the quality of the hunchback beggar, which is of course Yaakov, I said Yaakov, and I'm not going to go into the exact reference, but if you have the BRI book, I'm sure that Rabbi Kaplan must have given a reference about it. But I will tell you one thing, that Yaakov's quality is Torah, in terms of his placement in the Ushpizin list. And as the bearer of Torah, he is absolutely the quality of little holding much. Like, you know, look around. So there's like all these books here, and then like if I go to another, you know, behind this computer, so there's just like another 2 walls of books, and then you go outside into my salon, and there's like another 2 huge walls of books, and downstairs in the Machsan there's more, and outside in the back there's more, and okay, so there's like books and books and books and books. Now there's really only one book, you know, meaning in all of Jewish tradition, like we have tens of thousands. That's what's extant, right? That's what we still have. But throughout the course of Jewish history, there are so many books that have been lost. So we're talking about like tens upon tens of thousands of different individual manuscripts and Torah works that have been penned and published, or that were written in manuscript, or that were even just thought and never written down, right? Of Torah ideas, Torah concepts. And they could be on any number of subjects, and they go the full expanse of halacha, Jewish literature, medrash, agadah, you know, like Kabbalah, the whole spectrum, right? But if I was going to ask you, really, what is the Jewish book? What are you going to tell me? Well, it's the Torah, right? It's the written Torah. Now, in terms of our understanding of the nature of the written Torah, so all of the oral tradition has its link and root in the written Torah itself, right? All of it, every bit of medrash, every bit of Kabbalistic secret, every bit of halacha, every bit is somehow, and sometimes it's on like the coats of a letter, it's on the crown or the tip of a letter. It says Rabbi Akiva, he was dorish tilei tilin shel halachot mi Tagin, Shebaotiyot, with the crowns on the letters, Rabbi Akiva was able to expound upon mountains of halachot. The Sefer Torah, the Torah itself, is the quality of little holding much. It is only a circumscribed number of letters from the first Beit of Breshit until the last Lamed of Leini Kol Yisrael, and nevertheless, every bit of Torah wisdom that has ever been expounded, whether it's in written form or in oral form, or even just in thought form, is all emerging from this very, very limited number of letters. So the Sefer Torah, the Torah itself, is the quality of little holding much. It has many, many different expressions of this. Many different expressions of this. Little holding much. It's a great quality to have. To be little holding much. Little holding much means that you can have many family members and associations and all of the people in your life, and you somehow have space for them, not only in your home to host them and at your table, but in your heart and in your mind to encompass them and have them be a part of you. It means that you have a kind of expansiveness of spirit, and also it has to do with being able to find your place in the great, under the great tree of the Torah itself, and anyone who wants to go read the story can get a better idea about it. After that, we have our Beggar Without Hands, and we're going to end before you know it, because Rabbi Nachman didn't tell the story of the Beggar Without Feet. So our Beggar Without Hands has power in his hands, and he has power to heal in his hands. We get our hunchback beggar. We have our beggar without the here it is. What's his quality? Our beggar without hands. Yeah. He says, "You think I don't have hands? Not the case." He says, "I have power in my hands, but I don't use the power in this world in my hands. I have other purposes for it, for the power in my hands." Now, this part of the story, which actually I think we learned at length when we did, we kind of like subdivided it out in the course on Tikkun HaKlali. So I'm not going to go through it in depth now, and anyway, we don't have time. But I highly recommend that you open up the story and go through it. The idea of the beggar who has so much power in his hands is really because he has the ability to diagnose the spiritual illness of the Jewish soul by testing the pulses to see where it's lacking vitality. And he's able to use song to draw spiritual vitality and joy back to the Jewish soul. That's the power that he has in his hands. It's associated with his hands. You have 10 fingers and 10 types of song, and each one has its ability to feel a different pulse and to bring life and vitality back to the princess, to the Jewish soul who has lost all of her vitality and is so in a state of such unconsciousness. Now, the story that he brings to be able to prove his point that he has this koach b'yadayim, that he has power in his hands. It's a very long and involved and very beautiful story. But the idea of, well, where's our Ushpizin? Our guest is Yosef HaTzadik. Yosef HaTzadik, whose power is in purity, Tzadik Yisod Olam, and who's able to draw life and vitality, meaning the connection between Yisod and Malchut, is that all of the good influences that come from all the prior beggars feed through this channel of giving. It's like the powerful hands that can bestow. So this aspect of being able to bestow and give and fill in the lack is very much the quality of our sixth beggar. And now we get quickly to our last beggar. And Rabbi Nachman didn't tell the story of the last beggar, of the beggar without feet. The beggar without feet parallels David HaMelech, King David, who we know his power is in his feet. He dances before Hashem. He comes up from a very, very bad place and draws himself up through his own energies and leaps. It says he leaps before Hashem. So he's a jumper and a leaper from the low place to the high place. And he appears to have no feet, but actually he's got beautiful, beautiful, strong, powerful legs. Rabbi Nachman didn't want to tell his part of the tale because he said it would reveal too many secrets about the coming of Mashiach. But we know that, when by the time you get to the ends of the holiday of Sukkot, and with this I'll end because I'm also melting and very tired. So by the time we get to the end of the holiday of Sukkot, so the quality of David is expressed on Hoshana Rabbah. That's the 7th day of the festival, which then kind of it pushes forward into Shmini Atzeret. Now, I'm speaking from the perspective of Eretz Yisrael because, of course, those who are outside of Israel, you have a little bit of a different timetable, but it's not the original timetable. So if we go back to the original timetable, we have our 7th day of the festival, which is not a festival day. It's Hoshana Rabbah, a lot of prayer, a lot of business with dealing with the ground, because we smack Hoshanas on the ground. So it means we're doing stuff with the area of the feet and the raglin, the place where things are really, really difficult. It's hard to stay connected because you're always so attached to the things of this world, but you have to break the association and get off the ground. And then we move from Hoshana Rabbah, we move into the 8th day. Now, Shmini Atzeret, we know, is associated with David HaMelech. So it's the flip into Shmini Atzeret. The sages say about they have to do specifically with the offerings of Shmini Atzeret, is that throughout the 7 days of the festival, we bring all these bulls on behalf of the 70 nations, a total of 70 bulls that were brought as offerings throughout the entire 7 days of the festival in decreasing order, until we finally get to Shmini Atzeret, at which point it's only one animal paralleling the uniqueness of the relationship between ourselves and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we're no longer bringing up those 70 bulls. We've finished with them. The idea being that now it's the time when Malchut, when the quality of Malchut and the uniqueness of the relationship comes to be revealed. So remember I said that the opening narrative is like an envelope, and it comes full circle, and it really does circle around the end, even though it doesn't appear to. Because in the end, he talks about, here at the end of the story, he says, here. Here, this is the end of the 6th beggar. The story has not one single redundant word. This is Reb Noson's note on it. Anyone well versed in the sacred literature will be able to find a number of clues there, etc., etc. And he brings a number of teachings that clarify it for us. Now, here. Where's the last one? Here. The story of the 7th day, about the beggar with no feet, and the conclusion of the introduction about the king's son that took over the kingdom. These he said he would not tell. So we see, even at the end, in notes at the end, we can see that the closure of the 7th beggar plus the closure of what happened to that poor prince, the king, the young king, who had fallen away from his faith, who had become depressed, whose people had fallen into atheism, who became impoverished, who became exiled, right? So he says those things he's not gonna tell. Who can fathom even a fraction of the many clues and wondrous secrets contained in the story? So, and that's where he ended, meaning we know that the uplifting of the 7th beggar, meaning him getting on his feet, is really associated with the fullness of redemption and the arrival of Mashiach. But Rabbi Nachman didn't want to speak too much about it clearly. And just to bear in mind, and this I'll end because it's already very late. During Sukkot, we say at the festival, Harachaman hu yakim lanu et Sukkat David hanofalet. We add to the Birkat Hamazon that the Merciful One should uplift the Sukkah of David that is falling. Nofalet, it doesn't mean that it has fallen. It means that it's in the process always of falling. It means it doesn't have feet. It's always falling down. David HaMelech's quality also needs so much chizuk. He was a nefel, like he was a soul that didn't even have life and vitality. It wasn't even going to be born. It needed to be given life. I'm not going to go into that midrash right now, but those who know it know it. So this idea of during Sukkot drawing life and vitality and singing again and again has Harachaman hu yakim lanu et Sukkat David hanofalet, understanding that last beggar he needs us. We need him, but he needs us. So go through the story on Sukkot. I gave you a little introduction, and I hope it's been useful. And take it with you. I wish everybody a beautiful, beautiful new year. Everything good in ruchniut, in gashmiut, spiritually and physically. Everyone should have everything they need. Good health, children for those who need children, shidduchim for those who need shidduchim, parnasah for those who need parnasah, and happiness and joy and everything good in the new year. We should all merit to celebrate the arrival of all of our Ushpizin together in Yerushalayim Yer HaKodesh. במהרה בימינו. כסיל וחסימה טובה.